Good morning, folks. Welcome back to 3 Zen. This morning, I'm going to begin by sharing a story about a low-level mission I flew with this young man at Randolph, late 80s. At any rate, the mission was planned as a mid-level navigation sortie from Randolph to Barksdale, followed by a low-level mission on the return trip. The flight over was uneventful. Really straightforward. This kid had really prepared for the mission. He was highly motivated, upbeat, and actually fun to fly with. And so it was going very well. We get to base ops at Barksdale, and after getting a couple Cokes, we began briefing for the flight back. He pulls out two maps that he'd prepared, one for himself and then one for me. And the maps were very well done. The kid had put the time in it. He'd done the preparation. It was just going well, with one small exception. I noticed on his map that the target was about perhaps an inch or two from the edge of the map, and he had no instructions on how to get from the target back to Randolph. Well, this is going to be interesting, but we'll see how it works out. So we take off, and he's navigating to the entry point. And once we get to the entry point, he makes all the appropriate radio calls, and we descend and we enter the low-level route. Now, the low-level route's flown in increments of 60 knots, beginning with 360. 360, 420, 480, 540 sometimes. But anyway, this day we're flying, I think, 480 knots. And we're hitting all the turn points right on time. And the mission's going very well until we hit the target. Now, we hit the target on time, obviously on airspeed and so forth, and he's just real pleased with himself. So we hit the target, come across that, and as we come across that, I said, well, sir, I said, how do we find our way back to Randolph? And I kind of I'd taken the mirrors and tipped him a little bit so that I could see his face. I see him look down, look up, look down. It was like two, the pitch and bank steering bars on the ADI, only these were in his eyes, they centered, and two off flags dropped in view. And although he didn't say it, I could almost hear him say, oh shit. But be that as it may, I said, well, sir, I said, now I'm playing the role of a student, okay? So I said, well, sir, I said, probably the best idea, since we're off the low level route, is to slow this bad boy down. So he pulls the throttles back and begins a climb. And I said, one of the other IPs I've flown nav sorties with, told me if I was ever lost, it's probably a good idea to begin climbing so I can have a better look around and maybe get my bearings. So he said, that's a good idea. So we began climbing, and I said, probably not another idea that might be worth thinking about would be to squawk VFR with our transponder. So he says, yeah, why don't you do that? So I reached down and set in the VFR transponder code. So as we're climbing, we begin to pick up Austin off to our right. And I said, dang, that looks familiar. What do you think that is? And that big long road there kind of going south. Any idea what that might be? And he says, I think that's probably Austin and maybe I-35. And I said, kind of looks like it, doesn't it? So he began to break the code, and we followed I-35 down. Pretty soon we picked up San Marcos and then New Braunfels, and then he was in his element. So he checks in with San Antonio Approach Control. We get picked up on radar and head back to the house without further incident. Comes in, lands, and everything's cool. We get to the squadron, and I was facing a crew duty issue, so I said, listen, I can't take a lot of time to debrief here in the squadron because I've got crew duty issues to concern myself with. Let's go over to the snack bar because I need to talk with you a little bit. I said, why don't you get your grade sheet and your grade book, and we'll head over to Mr. B's, the snack bar, and have a little talk about this. He knew at that time he was unsat. The ride, he knew he'd failed the ride. And he was really kind of down in the dumps, if you might imagine. So he comes over and we sit down and we talk about it. Now, I'm faced with what's the corrective action? Have him fly 2 review rides and turn in a new map? Or have a come to Jesus meeting with the kid and talk to him about keeping his head out of his ass? Well, I chose the second option. So I told him, I said, listen, here's what the deal is. I said, I think that was an excellent ride, but I don't think you're going to get an excellent on this mission, on the grade. I said, you probably walk away with a good. And I said, but I want you to do something for me. I said, I want you to take this map and I want you to take it back to your home base. And when you get back there, I said, you're going to be given a table with 2, 3, 4 students. And I want you to take that map and put it under the glass on your desk, under the plexiglass. And when a student asks you why you have that particular map of that particular level under your glass, I want you to take a moment and explain to them how you did everything just in an outstanding fashion, and then you shoved your head up your ass. You think you can do that? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, if you do that, you'll pass this ride. He said, not a problem, sir. Big smile. And I said, you did very well, but we just need to keep following through until we get back to the home base. And he kind of got it. So I let him go, and he was off back to Columbus is where he was stationed. And I didn't think anything more about it. One of the things I learned being a check airman is I could get more instruction done in that couple hours I had with the kid than his IP could during the whole course. So that being said, wind the clock ahead about 18 months, and I had a staff visit over to Columbus. So I fly over to Columbus, and I'm walking through the hallway of 38 Squadron, and this guy comes up, starts tugging on my flight suit, and he says, sir, he says, you may not remember me. And I look at him, and it was kind of familiar, but not really. I mean, I had flown with a lot of guys at that time. He said, well, I have something I want to show you. And I said, yeah, what's that? So he said, well, sir, you need to come in the flight room with me. So I said, okay. So I had no clue what he was talking about. So I walk in the flight room, and he walk over the desk, and there's that damn map under his desk. Under his glass. I don't know if I was that serious about it or not. Maybe at the time I was, but that just cracked me up to see that. And made me feel good because he was doing very well as an instructor, I later found out. They were really pleased to have him as an IP. Now, the story right there is a great story in and of itself. But as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. Let's continue winding the clock ahead. Maybe 20 years, I don't know. Yeah, 20 years or so. And I'm at a dining in down at Randolph in 2008, maybe 2007, 2009, somewhere in that area. And I see this colonel, full colonel. He looks familiar, but I can't quite pin it. So anyway, it's at this dining in, and I keep looking over at him. Man, that guy's familiar, but I'm not sure where. So during the break between the formal and the informal portion, I walk up and I say, excuse me, sir. I mean, he's a full colonel. I'm a lieutenant colonel, and even though I'm retired, I still respect the rank. I said, but you sure look familiar. And he looks at me, comes to attention, pops a salute, and says, Colonel Holliker. He says, I'm Colonel so-and-so. And then I knew who it was right away. And we laughed, kind of embraced maybe for a moment of mutual respect. And he says, sir, he says, I still have that damn map. He has that map. He says, it's at home in a box somewhere. But he says, that map really made an impression on me for my whole Air Force career. It's those stories that I hear, that feedback that I got, that really gave me pride, or gives me pride in having been a T-38 IP. I later learned he was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross, a DFC, and the war in Iraq, flying F-16s. So sometimes when it's a clear cut, unsat, you take a chance on a kid, you make a call, and it really turns out to be a fantastic story. So I hope you enjoyed this story, hearing it as much as I did telling it. Thanks.